everyone, it's Marla here. I'm the owner and creator behind From Rust to Roses Vintage. I also happen to belong to a creative group made up of several amazing women. They're all crafters like myself. And a few times a year we decide that we're going to do what is called a Flippin Frenzy. It's a lot of fun. We draw a name and we send that person 5 items to upcycle and have them make a video of it. And then of course someone will send us 5 items and we do the same. And then at the end of the Flippin Frenzy, we have 2 days of a playlist with everyone's videos on it. So you can see what they created with the things they were sent. Okay, now let's take a look at what was in the box. The first thing I pulled out was this sign type thing. It was laying on the top. Reminds me of something the restaurants put out to show the special of the day. And then there were 3 pieces of wood, circular pieces that still had the bark on them in different sizes. Okay. There was a lot of silver. There are spoons that have come unattached from the handle. There are spoons that still have the handle attached. There was also this metal piece. I'm not sure what it is. It looks like it was intended to hold this bell-shaped thing on the bottom. There's some holes in the top. I'm not sure what they're for. She also sent this small infuser. At first I thought tea, but it's too small for tea. And so possibly it's for spices. She sent a piece of ephemera. And then the last thing was this trivet. It reminds me of something my mom would have had in the 70s. Anyway, stick around and I'll show you what I did with all of this stuff. For project 1, I started with the 3 pieces of wood. I took them outside and sanded them quite a bit to make them a little more even on top because I had decided I wanted to make ornaments with them. I used air dry clay to make 3 molds and glued those to the tops of the ornaments, and then I went back and painted each of those molds in different colors. Because these were ornaments, I decided to add a touch of gold to each one of them. To finish them, I added a hook at the top, a ribbon, and then a piece of twine so I could hang them from my tree. I think they turned out really cute. For project 2, I decided to make another ornament. There were a few things that I did not get recorded, but I started with that infuser, the tiny silver ball, and decided just to cover the entire thing with molds made from air dry clay. Before the clay was completely dry, I gave the entire thing a coat of fusion mineral paint, and then I took out a shade of red and a shade of green and painted the elements. I outlined those in gold, and then added some antiquing paste to make the ornament look vintage. I removed the chain and replaced it with a ribbon, and then added a little sparkle to the top. It's small, but it's beautiful. For project 3, I decided to tackle all of the spoons and pieces of spoons Sandra sent me. I started out by giving each one of them a coat of fusion mineral paint in the color casement. While they were drying, I picked out 4 small images that I wanted to decoupage on each of the spoons. Once the paper was thoroughly dry, I took out some sandpaper and removed the excess from around the edges of the spoons. Then I applied parts 1 and 2 of Pentart's Fine Line Crackle. I decided I wanted to embellish the spoons a little bit, so I used air dry clay to make tiny roses, which I then glued to the top of each spoon handle. I painted all of the roses, and then when they were dry, gave each spoon a final coat of a glossy varnish. I thought for a long time about what to hang the spoons from. At first I was going to use a small rolling pin, and then I decided to take one of my ironstone plates I had picked up at Goodwill and transform it into a Victorian Christmas plate. I started by decoupaging this beautiful piece of decoupage paper onto the entire plate. I lost some of the footage, but after I decoupaged the paper on, I put on fine line crackle and then 2 of my IOD Christmas transfers. Each of these is from a different holiday release. The tree is from one of last year's releases, and the wreath is from Figgy Pudding, which came out a long time ago. I used antiquing paste to bring out the crackle, and I had attached 4 hooks to the back using epoxy, but once I hung the spoons I realized the hooks were too close together, and so although I didn't have time to change it for this video, I am going to go back and move the hooks so that there is some spacing between each of the spoons. I absolutely love the way this turned out, and I'm probably going to keep it for myself. You'll have to let me know what you think of it in the comments. For project 4, I turned my attention to that Trivet. I was a little concerned about being able to paint over that rubberized coating, and so I took it out and gave it 2 coats of shellac and then 2 coats of Rust-Oleum flat white paint. I had chose a decoupage paper with 2 cardinals on it, and so I used water to tear around the edges, and then I decoupaged the paper onto the tile part of the trivet. While the paper was drying, I got out my Juliet mold and some fast cast resin and started making some molds to glue on the top and bottom of the trivet as well as around the edge. I wanted to make this look like an old French trivet or a piece of tile artwork. I used Titebond Quick and Thick to glue on all of my castings, and then once they were dry, I painted all of them in Infusion mineral paint in the color Chateau. Once the paint was dry, I coated the trivet with clear wax first and then followed up with a coat of dark wax to give it that vintage antique look. I went around the castings with a little bit of gold gilding, but I wasn't too concerned about getting it on everything. After all, I wanted this to look old. I also applied fine line crackle to the decoupage paper, but I did not get that part recorded. I thought a long time about what to do with the sign, and then I went through my decoupage papers and I found the perfect paper for this sign. So I started out by giving both sides of the sign a coat of white paint. I used the water method to tear the pieces of decoupage paper and then went about decoupaging them to both sides of the sign. The first half of the decoupage paper was a picture of a cute little gingerbread house and 2 little gingerbread men. Went over the entire piece with the decoupage medium and then let that dry before I turned it over and started on side 2. You might be able to tell, even though it's upside down, that the second half of the paper was a recipe for gingerbread. And that's why I thought this decoupage paper was perfect for the 2-sided sign. I used DIY's darkened decrepit patina to go over all of the wood so that it would have a finish and would be darker, as I'm not a fan of light colored wood. Once again, I took out the aging wax and went around the edges and a little bit into the decoupage paper on each side to give it more character and make it look a little bit vintage. When I was done distressing it, I decided to turn my attention to the top and give it a little decoration. So here I'm gluing on some pine boughs with red bells, and then, as you'll see, I eventually make a ribbon for it. And although I thought I had it recorded, it turns out that that part was out of view. I used several different ribbons and put them all together to make sort of a messy bow using the small Bowdabra that I got off of Amazon. And because the bling was still sitting out on the table, of course I had to use a piece and add it to my bow for a little holiday sparkle. I think this thing turned out so stinking cute. I love it. I'm going to sit it in my kitchen during the holidays, and I might even try that recipe. For Project 6, I decided to tackle that odd piece that Sandra had sent me. According to Google, it's part of something that you would use to burn incense during a religious ceremony. Anyway, I'm using it for an entirely different purpose, and I started by painting the top of it with a light blue mineral paint. To add a little something to the bottom, I decided to cut a garland in half and wrap that around the edge. And now I'm giving my purpose away as I tie a large sprig of mistletoe underneath the lid. I added a little green moss, but you'll see later that I covered that up with snow paste. I glued the chain in place and then added a ribbon to the top and a crystal bauble from the bottom. I hung it from a tree so you could see what it looked like, but this is the mistletoe that's going to hang in my doorway during the Christmas season. I hope you enjoyed watching me transform all of the items Sandra sent me into Christmas decor. I love doing these Flippin Frenzies. It's a lot of fun and always a challenge. If you like what you saw, please visit my channel From Rust to Roses Vintage. And have a great day. Thank you for watching.